Welcome to What We Made Possible, the podcast where we explore the power of healing and driving change for advocates, leaders, and change makers. The conversations here draw the connection between creating new possibilities in the world, possibilities of care, of belonging, of thriving for our communities, with stories of personal healing and loving relationship building. I am your host, Patty Dayleg, leadership coach for social change. I spent a decade in nonprofits, government, and DEI, securing 6- and 7-figure opportunities for communities of color. And I've experienced firsthand the transformative power of compassion, healing, and belonging in making a bigger impact. Let's dive in. Hey there, welcome back to What We Made Possible. I have a fun one for us today. Okay, here's my prompt. What would happen if Michael, the architect from The Good Place, came to coaching? Michael, the architect, he's this immortal being, this reformed demon. He wears a lot of bow ties. He's played by Ted Danson, so he's like very dapper, right? He's the creator of an experimental, torture-based afterlife neighborhood that goes a little off the rails, if you will. If you haven't seen The Good Place, then obviously, like, spoiler alert. But yeah, more importantly, Michael is a deeply confused leader who starts to wonder if maybe, just maybe, people can change, right? The whole thing of the show is that they're pretending that they are in the good place when they're really in the bad place. And at some point, at many points, right, the main kind of like group of people figure it out over and over and over. And then he just has to keep resetting it. And he's trying to prove that this is like the best way to torture them is to like torture them with each other. And in the end, he's like, oh, wait, actually, like maybe our whole system is a little messed up and maybe not everyone belongs in the bad place. And so he like eventually advocates to like change the whole system and like people can work themselves into the good place in the afterlife. And it's a hilarious show if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, then like let me know and we can cry and laugh together about it. But yeah, Michael's arc is one that I see it, I see it in real life, especially folks who like come from corporate, people who lead or, were taught to lead through control and strategy and moral certainty. And now they're trying to lead with more presence and more purpose and like they want to care more about their people. So I want to talk about Michael as a case study in leadership and in change and what happens when we stop trying to orchestrate outcomes and we start just like growing into it, right? We start like living into it. So let's start out with who Michael is as a reminder. And again, spoiler alert. He starts the show as a literal demon. And I will say, like, we find this out like towards the end of the first season that it's not actually the good place, it's the bad place, and he's a demon. So yeah, he's tasked with designing this new version of hell that looks like heaven, right? And the twist is that the humans are torturing each other. But as the experiment unfolds, this unexpected thing happens where Michael changes, or rather he starts to want to change. He gets curious, he cares, he starts asking questions, and then he spirals, right? Suddenly he's not sure who he is, he doubts himself, he wants to help, but he keeps trying to control everyone in the process. And he wants to lead, but he keeps getting in his own way. And that's so real, right? I coach a lot of mission-based leaders, so people who work in public health, policy, philanthropy, advocacy. And so many of us were trained to lead through control, through certainty. We were trained to be competent, right? But then something like shifts and they realize in their new workplace, in their new leadership roles, they realize the old ways don't work anymore and they want to lead differently. I've mentioned in the past about a study that said that BIPOC leadership is declining and the desire for it is declining within nonprofits. And one of the reasons people continue to take on leadership roles, BIPOC folks continue to take on leadership roles, is because they want to right a wrong that they experienced, right? So we come into the work wanting to make a difference. There's some wrong that we experience, and then we want to make it right. And that's very often what pulls us into leadership. And so it's at that moment when you get there, when you're like, oh, I actually don't have like a blueprint for how to do this well, you start to feel lost. You feel tired. You feel ashamed, right? Just like Michael from The Good Place. So let's pretend that Michael comes to me for coaching. He's like, obviously, like Ted Danson is an older white man. And like the character is not even a human. And I coach mostly folks of color. But let's imagine that he zaps into our first session in like a swirl of brimstone, and he has this clipboard and his blazer and his bow tie and his color-coded plan, right? He has like all these little tabs on his book and this like moral philosophy textbook under one arm from Chidi, right? And he says, I want to be good now, but I don't know how. So here's a few things that might come up in our coaching. So the first challenge is this moral awakening and this like identity crisis. So I talked about this identity crisis in my last hypothetical coaching program with Sarah Wynn Williams from Facebook. And that's definitely happening here too, right? Michael used to love torturing people, right? He was good at it, but now he's repulsed by what he used to enjoy. And that's destabilizing, right? Because when who you were before is in conflict with who you want to become, it can feel like you don't know who you are. It can feel like you don't know yourself at all. And so in our coaching program, I would help Michael to slow down, to notice what part of him feels afraid, to name what he's grieving, and to explore who he is now without trying to earn redemption by performing goodness, right? And then the other part of this, like I said in the previous episode, what parts of him would he want to take with him, right? If anything. What part of torturing people would he want to bring along into not torturing people? I don't know, if anything, right? Like it's always an open question and I never know what to expect with folks, but it's definitely something that allows us to make a change in a way that sticks, right? We can bring a previous part of ourselves with us. One of my mentors, Carrie Peters, says like anytime there's a change, there's still things that stay the same. Anytime there's a change, there's something that stays the same. So like what, we can be intentional about that. What do you want to stay the same even as you're shifting? Okay, that's the first challenge, right? This like moral awakening that he's having and this identity crisis of like, oh my God, I'm a torturer, I'm a demon. Like, how do I be something new? Okay, second, leadership confusion. So in the show, he swings from being over controlling to over apologizing. He tries to be the fun boss and then panics and then takes everything over. That is so common for folks of color coming into leadership. They kind of overcorrect and then they're like, oh, fuck, I have to just do it now. And so, we're going to explore, or we would explore, how to lead with integrity and how to trust others to grow without managing every single step, right? And I think part of that is how to separate leadership from needing to be liked, which is something that I work on all the time. I see folks who are trying to, they like almost overcorrect. And I've had a whole episode about this, like overcorrecting. He used to be this like very controlling person, and then now he is a demon, now he's apologetic about that. I don't think folks are necessarily apologetic, but there is an overcorrection of like, oh, I want to be the opposite of what my like really toxic boss was. And then they realize like the opposite of that doesn't really work either. And so there's like this weird swing that happens. So yeah, how do we like build trust, right? How do we lead with integrity? How do we do that in a way that we don't have to be liked, but at least in that moment, right? Like there's still a relationship, but how can we lead in a way that feels good for us? Okay. Challenge number 3, guilt and overfunctioning. So he wants to fix everything, right? He wants to make up for centuries, maybe millennia of harm. And he wants to micromanage every human's personal development. So we would talk about accountability without over responsibility and the difference between repair and martyrdom. There was a way that he was trying to carry everybody else's healing, right? Like he was trying to get everybody to the good place and trying to like micromanage their every kind of action so that there was the only way for them to get to the good place. But he was kind of actually just like avoiding his own healing. So it's interesting, right? Like how do we show up in our relationships that kind of is a mirror to how we are with ourselves? He's this guilty, over-functioning person. How do we shift that into like real accountability and not trying to fix everyone, but like how do you make it so that you're setting people up for success, right? He's an architect. How can you design and how can you like create the architecture for people to succeed without like turning it into IKEA, where like there's only one way to walk through the showroom, right? Like we can be IKEA or we can lead in a different way. Okay. Challenge number 4 for Michael is control and the fear of uncertainty. And these are all very connected, right? Michael loves a plan. He has many, many backup plans, but he learns he's not human, but he learns that humans are messy. Growth is nonlinear. In fact, time is nonlinear. If you were to draw out what time looks like in good place time, then it would spell Jeremy Bearimy. Like the time would go in all of these swirlies and go back and over itself and da 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 da. And if you look at it, it would say Jeremy Bearimy. Anyway, it's slow and it's a process. And so there's a lot of uncertainty that happens, right? So I would help Michael by sitting with him with what he cannot control, to practice letting go, really, and to practice breathing through the discomfort of not knowing, and then to like really be able to take action where he could. And of course, to grow where he could influence. Like I work with a lot of folks in policy work that are trying to influence like entire, state economies and state like health systems and national work, right? And of course, there's what you can control and what you can't control. There's ways to grow your influence, right? And in the process, really letting go of what you cannot control in the moment. So for Michael, a lot of that uncertainty was like really big for him. So we would play with that. Okay, challenge number 5. This is the last one. Longing for meaning and mortality. This one is my favorite. By the end of the show, oh my God, it's like such a sad ending, but like such a good one, right? Like I feel like The Good Place is probably one of the best endings that I've ever seen on a show. Anyway, so by the end, Michael, who has lived forever, right? He just wants to be human. He wants an end. He wants to feel. And so we would explore what happens when life becomes finite, right? What becomes precious, and what makes meaning when you stop trying to be perfect, right? The other thing is that like he ends up being part of something bigger, right? Like, and so what does it mean to be some part of something bigger? You can't control it, right? But you belong to it, you're contributing to it. And so I would love to explore like Michael at the end of the show. How do we want to be with an ending, right? Like if he just wants that ending, how do we want to be with that? Michael's story is cosmic, it's silly, and even though he is not a human, the story is deeply human. Right now, when the federal government is using ICE to attack cities and arrest and abduct like people who are not even their stated targets. I mean, even if they are their stated targets, right? Like people who are undocumented, people who have backgrounds that are not perfect, people who are Black and brown, right? Like anyway, so many of us are trying to just like survive knowing that this is happening in the world. And so many of us are trying to lead differently, right? We're trying to show up in new ways. We're trying to atone or evolve. Maybe not atone unless, I don't know, maybe you are, but maybe you're trying to evolve. Maybe you're trying to rebuild, but we don't always know how, right? We get stuck in old patterns around control and guilt and urgency and perfection. And we try to help everybody else grow without tending to ourselves. And we want to be good, but we forget how to be whole. So that's the work that happens in coaching, right? Not to perfect you, but to accompany you as you change. So if you've ever seen yourself in Michael from The Good Place, if you're a reformed perfectionist, if you're a recovering fixer, I had one boss who was like, she called herself a fix-a-hoe, you know? If you're a leader who's trying to do things differently, I see you, you know? I work with folks who are navigating exactly these kinds of transitions and trying to learn to trust their own growth and their own healing. So if that's you, you can absolutely reach out for a one-on-one coaching or explore team coaching. We can also co-create a team experience for your org. The links are all in the show notes. So yeah, if you resonate with Michael, I want you to remember that you are allowed to change. You're allowed to let go of who you used to be. And like I said last time, you're allowed to begin again. All right, talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to What We Made Possible. I really hope this episode resonated. As a coach, I always end with action steps. And so I invite you to do something, which is to pause and ask yourself, what resonated? What am I taking away? And what's possible for me and my community now? If you liked this conversation, please leave a review and a rating. It helps so much. Thanks again.